Hello, welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you so much for joining me for today's show. Well, today we continue on in Matthew chapter 16. We'll look at Matthew chapter 16, verse 18 today. So again, Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. This is probably one of the more iconic, if you will, one of the more iconic passages in Matthew's Gospel, besides the Great Commission. This is the verse that says, "The gates of hell will not prevail against the church." So again, Matthew chapter 16, verse 18 says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it." This verse is only a couple sentences long, but there is so much going on in it. First, we see that Peter's name, we see the name given to Simon, which is Peter. Here, Jesus changes Peter's name, which is very important in its own right. But firstly, Jesus here is portraying the church as kind of like a temple, like a spiritual temple, if you will. And so just like Solomon built the Jewish temple, here's Jesus as kind of the new Solomon, or the Davidic son that was prophesied. He's the anointed Messiah, and he's building up the new covenant temple, which is the church. And so what's interesting, the word church, Matthew is the only gospel writer that uses the word church. In Greek, it's ekklesia, which means, a congregation or an assembly. And like I said just a second ago, Jesus uses it in a similar way for the new covenant community, which is known as the church. And we see that written all through the book of Acts, through the early church documents, in Ignatius, Polycarp, Irenaeus, all these great early writers. And in the translation I read from today, which is the Revised Standard Version, we see the word Hades. The gates of Hades should not prevail against the church. Some translations that you read have the translation as hell or Sheol. And so in the Old Testament, Hades, which is called Sheol, is kind of known as the pit. It's the place where dead souls go to get to it's the place that dead souls go, basically. And they descend through a gate. And it's kind of like a temporary realm where souls are detained until the Last Judgment. But here, Hades is also the realm of evil forces. Evil forces that bring death, decay, deception, all those bad things. Now, this verse isn't saying there isn't a hell. There definitely is a hell. Jesus spoke about it a lot. But Hades and hell can kind of be used interchangeably here in that regard. Now let's get to the name Peter. Greek, it's Petros, which literally translates to rock in English. That's the literal translation. Now in the Jerusalem temple, in Solomon's temple, there was what was called the foundation stone. And that foundation stone blocked the cap that led to the netherworld, or to Hades, if you will. And so the temple rested on that rock, because the gates of Hades would not be able to prevail against the temple, because that rock was there, kind of capping that off. Now, let's look at this verse in that background, which, remember, Matthew was writing to a primarily Jewish audience, so they knew exactly what Matthew was talking about here. And so Jesus here is guaranteeing that the powers of the dark side, if you will, deception, death, all this, will not overcome the church, which is the new temple built on the foundation stone of St. Peter. And as such, he enables Peter, and consequently his successors, to hold back those dark forces and to keep error from being proclaimed in place of the gospel. And that's why we as Catholics say that this is one of those passages say that Peter is the first pope. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the Daily Bible Podcast. Thank you for joining me each and every day. God love you. Thank you for joining me. We'll catch you tomorrow. God bless.